Today I'm going to be talking about the basics of Final Cut Pro. Even if you're not new to Final Cut Pro, you might learn a few things from this video, so without further ado, let's get started. So when you start Final Cut Pro, you have something called libraries. A library can contain multiple events and projects in the same location. When you create a new project or event, it's automatically included in the active library. The library tracks all of your media files, your editing decisions, and the associated metadata. So if we go here, you have project, event, and library. Let's say we want to start a new library right now. So you can call it whatever you want. I want to call this FCPX tutorial. Save. You can see that it saves it in the media, in the movies folder. This is a project that I worked on recently, and I'm going to show you the final result. But I'm going to try to recreate what I did here before to show you what you can achieve with the final results here. So once we created our library, I call it FCPX tutorial. Let's create a new project, and let's call this FCPX tutorial 1. Okay. As for these things, here's a quick description on what these things mean, but I won't worry about it that much if I were you for now. But the most important things for you to understand is the type of video, if you want it to be 1080p, if you want it to be 2K, 4K. Let's keep it right now at 1080p. Here's the resolution. This is the standard 1920 by 1080 for 1080p resolution. And this gives you the rate. For this specific footage, let's keep it at 60 because I took this footage in 60p, and that's going to help with slowing down the footage. I'm going to show you how to do that. The rendering, let's just keep it at ProRes 422. You don't need to worry about that for now. These are the different types of renderings. Audio, just keep it the way it is, and let's just press OK. So step 1, import your media into Final Cut Pro. So first of all, I'd like to transfer my files to Final Cut Pro. So you have to create a folder and transfer your files to it. Then step number 2 would be to import your files. So these are the videos I have of this project. I'm going to go ahead and import these files. So the way to add clips is to drag them to the timeline like this, and you can zoom in or zoom out by pinching the trackpad or the mouse. This is very simple and it's very easy. Or you can go to View right here and you can zoom in. There's also a shortcut which is Command equal, so that zooms in. Command equal, or Command minus, that zooms out if you want to just use the keyboard instead. So once you add the clips, let's say I want to add this clip, and then I want to add this clip, for example. Once you add all of your clips, first, this is the way I do my workflow. I add my clips, and then I look at each clip. And by the way, if you want this smooth playback, you can press S to get this smooth playback. You see that? It skims through the video like this. And if I press spacebar, it will play the video. On the magnetic timeline, with a click, you can arrange clips into audio lanes, separate visually distinct layers in the timeline. So the first thing I like to do is to detach the audio because I like to do some modifications to the audio. I click on the clip and then press Control-Shift-S. That detaches the audio. Let me show you that again. So that's detach audio, Control-Shift-S. Once you detach the audio, you can start playing with it. You can place it wherever you want. You can zoom in and you can see the waveform here. So this is the waveform, and you can see how the audio goes like here. Let's play this. Okay. All right, now that you know how the audio starts, there's something interesting here, which is this fade in, fade out effect. Let's say I want to add a fade-in effect here. I can just go right here and drag it. And you can see that will add a nice fade-in effect. Let's say if I want to add a fade-out effect, I can drag this here again. That will add a fade-out audio effect. Okay, up next is here. We can go to transitions. Now let's talk a little bit about transitions. And Final Cut comes with pre-installed or installed transitions that you can use. So for this particular transition, I want to have a zoom in effect. So let's go and click on this. This is called transitions. And I'm going to go ahead and type zoom. Let's say I want this And by the way, this can show you a preview. If you hover on the thumbnail here, it shows you a preview of how the transition looks like. So this is called zoom. This is called zoom and pan. Let's try to use zoom. So drag the transition and put it right here. If the clip is short, Final Cut's going to say that there's not enough extra media beyond the clip edges to create the transition. Just say create the transition, and it will create the transition right here. So you can see nice smooth transition right there. These little lines here control the clip as well. So if I do, okay, that's the maximum for this clip. If I do this, you can see that I can control the length of that clip. And this is the maximum. But if I go a little bit under that, you see that pointer changes from this to this. This means that I can make the transition faster. If you make it smaller, narrower like that, that means the transition goes faster. So let's go back to the previous one. Check out this. That's smoother, and this is faster. The way I do undo is by pressing Command Z. All right, now that we have our nice transition effect here, oh yeah, before that, I want to show you how to control this transition. So for this particular transition effect, if you press on the transition, you can even control where the transition is going to be. So I can control it, and I could put the center right there. Press spacebar to play. So now we're going to move on to the next clip, but you can see here, I did not remove the sounds. Oh, by the way, I don't need this. I don't need the sounds here. So let's go ahead and delete that. I am going to remove the sound here as well. Again, Control-Shift-S. I'm going to delete the sound right here. And let's play this right now without any sound. Okay, great. So this was my music track. Okay, you can see the music track is not matching the transition. So let's make that a little bit smaller. Let's bring it all the way here. Much better. So now the music started, and as you can see, this is for the music. This section's for the music, the section's for the video, and there's another section here for titles. We're going to talk about titles in a bit. Now I'm going to teach you something very important that you need to remember, which is the trimming, or the blade tool. If you want to cut a certain clip, you just pinpoint the location that you want to cut. Let's say I want to cut it. I don't want this last part here. I just want it to end right there. So first of all, find the place that you want your playhead to be. Click that, and you can even use your keyboard to go left and right. If I go back here, use the arrows left or right to exactly pinpoint the location that you want. So let's say I want it right here. Then press Command B. That's the blade tool. If you want another way to do that, you just go here and then select Blade, B. So when I press B, it changes to this, and if I press the mouse, if I tap, here it cuts, it cuts, it cuts, it cuts. So you have two ways of doing this. You either, if I press A again, but you see if I go here and if I press A, that's select. If I press B, that is blade. And there you go. Of course, these are just for demonstration purposes. I don't want that. I don't want this many cuts. So I'm doing undo. You can also do undo here. Go to undo trim. So that's Command Z. If you want to redo the blade here, this is the blade that I used. It's Shift Command Z. I want to delete this extra clip. I don't need this. So you can go ahead and press backspace. All right. Now that we've added 2 clips, let's add more clips. I'm going to add more. All right, guys, so now I've added a lot more clips. You can see here, I did the same thing. I selected my clips from here, from the viewer, and then I've added them. I've added some transition effects. So add all the clips that you want, like this, and then add some transition effects where you want the transitions to be. And this is the ending of the clip. Now let's go back and move on to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is titles. Now titles are very important in Final Cut Pro, and where you can find them is by pressing this button over here and going to titles, and you have some preset titles, some ready-made installed titles in Final Cut. Let's check them out. For example, let's go with the basic title right here, drag it all the way to your clip, and once you do, you can also control the length, the duration of it. This is very important, by the way. You can control exactly where you want the title to appear and the duration. So the length of this bar, the length of this rectangle here, represents the length of the title. So if I press play, the title is going to show here right up until this point. Remember, this is a timeline, and it's a magnetic one. If you want the magnetic timeline to be magnetic, you have to press this button right here. This will make it magnetic. So if I turn this off, and if I drag this somewhere, let's say I want this to start exactly here, you can see that it's not exactly magnetic like that. But if you see, it's not snapping here. But if I press the magnetic timeline, now you can see the thing turning into a yellow line. You see that? It snaps into place, which makes it much, much easier to edit. Now, let's control the length of this title. And let's call this FCPX, just for the sake of example. So it's going to show up like this. And by the way, keep in mind that when you want to edit titles, you double click on the rectangle here, and then you go to this pane right here. This is text. This is where you control your text. So you can write things here, and you can preview how that's going to look like here. Of course, this is too much. You don't need all of that. And if you scroll down, you can see here the properties for that title. So you can select the font. You have so many different types of fonts here. Select the one that you like. Let's say I want this one. And then you have the size. You can drag the size like this to make it smaller or bigger. Or you can use numbers. So you can enter numbers. Let's say I want it to be 300. There you go. The magnetic timeline can get very crowded. So make sure that you press on the item itself, on the title in this case, and then start editing the properties here. Start selecting the properties all the way from the font to the size to the alignment. This is the alignment if you want, and all the way to line spacing. These are more advanced options. And by the way, you can even position it according to the X, Y, and Z axes, but you don't need to worry about these things for now. To make it simple, just select this, come here, and then start dragging it around. You can see the position numbers here change, but if you want precise positioning, you can even enter it. Let's say I want it to be 120. So that gives you, for the x-axis, 120. The neat thing here is that it gives you these kind of guidance lines, I call them. You see that? You can snap. So this comes right here in the middle. Let's check out how that works. Nice. So let's go back to the title and add some transition effects here as well. Now the standard transition, the most famous transition effect is by pressing Command T. And this one is the cross dissolve, which is the first one here. If you go to the installed transitions, it's a very simple transition. You can see just dissolves. It fades like this. It dissolves. Let's see how that looks like now. Much better. And then it zooms. Okay. For this particular clip, you can see the transitioning is very smooth. Sometimes you want to mute the sound. You can do that by pressing V, so that mutes it, or right-click and press disable. So that disables the sound. So let's go ahead and disable the sound right now. Sometimes I do this. You can see that I have made this clip to be very smooth, and the way I achieved that is this footage was shot in 60 FPS, and then I slowed it down to 30. And once you do that, you achieve that nice dramatic slow motion effect. You see this? Let's go ahead and achieve that. Now I want to teach you how to do something called retime, which is to control the speed of the clip. Command R is the shortcut for that. So Command R, you'll see this little thing here. Or you can go to this button right here. You see that speedometer looking like button? Click on that. This gives you a few options. If you want to make your clip faster by 50%, for example, let's go ahead and make it faster by, okay, twice as fast. You see how fast that is now? Let's play that. Okay, Command Z, we don't want that. So it's slower by 50%. I've slowed it down by 50%. So this is how I slow it down. This is fast, this is slow. You slow it down by 50%. It's already slow. Let's slow it down even further. Let's say I want to slow it down by 25%. Let's check that out. You can see that it's even slower, but you can see a little bit of lag here. So I don't recommend that. If you shoot 60 FPS and then you change it to 30, that would work. But if you do it 25%, that's too much. Let's go back. Let's actually put this back to normal speed. So this was the normal speed. Check this out. You see, that was the normal speed. And once we slowed it down, we got this effect. Nice and smooth. So if you want to achieve this kind of slow motion effect, you can shoot your video in 60 FPS and then slow it down by 50% to achieve this kind of effect. Sometimes you want to speed up the video, so you go ahead and speed it up. And sometimes you may even want to do custom. So if you press custom, you have the percentage here and you can choose how much you want that percentage to be. Don't worry about these things right now. This is to reverse it. And don't worry about these things. Just worry about what percentage you want your speed, your custom speed to be. You're going to get used to this the more you practice with Final Cut. And by the way, the same thing can be done. Let's activate this again. To audio, so I can make this audio faster. Let's say I want to make it twice as fast. Now listen to this. You see that? Now the audio is faster. I can even make it slower. So if you have voiceovers, for example, sometimes you may want to speed up the voiceover or slow it down, whatever it is that you're working with. Remember, read time is important here. Remember, choosing your speed is important right here. You can also reverse the clip. So if I want to reverse this clip, let's say, I can just click this and then go to reverse. That's going to reverse it. So that means it's going to go backwards. Instead of going forward, it's going to go backwards. Let's go back to the way it was. See that? Okay, I don't need the sound again. Let me mute this. Yeah. All right, now we talked about titles, we talked about clips, we talked about transitions, we talked about audio. Let's talk a little bit about effects. So right here, if you click on this, we have something called video effects. And this is important because it has lots of interesting video effects that you can use. For example, you have blur, you've got cinematic effects here, color effects if you want to make something with color. But we're not going to get into too many details, but try some of these effects and see what works for you. Let's try, for example, a nice effect. Let's say, okay. Let's say I want to add this kind of effect right here. Aged paper. What you do is always drag that effect or transition to the clip, like this. And there you go. I know it doesn't look that nice. I'm just trying to show you here how effects work. I don't think I used effects in this much. Yeah. All right. The next thing that we're going to talk about, guys, is this, which is sound effects. Final Cut Pro is really powerful because it has built-in sound effects. So you can see, look at that baby crying. You have, okay, let's add, let's say I want to add this crowd applause. All I got to do is drag it down here, and you can see the magnetic timeline is kicking in. That yellow line right there, that means it's snapping to the same exact spot, the same exact place where this clip starts. Let's press play, spacebar, see how that goes. Now this is going to start here. You see that? Okay, let's activate this again. So now you know you have a powerful thing in Final Cut, which is sound effects, and it's built in. And it also has a search feature here. Let's say I want to search for airplane sounds. So there you go. All of these are airplane sounds. And the way to do this again is to drag the effect or the sound effect here. And it's going to go right underneath this audio clip. Okay, but I don't need that right now. I hope you guys got all of this information. The next thing that we need to talk about is the effects right here. And this can get complicated, but we're just going to keep it to the basics. You have a lot of effects for each clip. So let's say I want to select this clip right here. You see here, I've used a few effects here. I've used the color curves, I've used some color wheels, and I've used a color board. And let me show you what that means. If you press this right here, this button gives you the effects for color. So this is called color correction. And you have something called color grading. And if I press color curves, you can see I've played a little bit with the luma. This is the brightness. So let's change the brightness for this clip a little bit. You can see that. This is changing the brightness for the clip, and you can precisely do it the way you want. But let's just not get into too many complicated details. So that was for the curves, and you can also do the green, the red, the blue. And next is the color wheels. But color wheels in Final Cut, I think this is one of the most powerful options here, because you've got global, shadows, highlights, and midtones. And go ahead and experiment with these things, and you'll find out how that works. So if I press the global here, check that out. And if I press this, this is the global effects. And I can even take that here and drag it the way I want to achieve the specific color that I want. So this is called color correction. And go ahead and explore these things in detail. Since this is a Final Cut Pro 101, I'm not going to go through the details of color grading, but I just wanted to show you what this does. Next is the color board. So the color board here gives you exposure, saturation, and color, and you can play with the exposure here. You can play with the different, you can play with the exposures right here. These are the shadows. These are the highlights. You can play with them right like this. These are the midtones. You can find lots of videos on YouTube on how to achieve specific looks. For example, if you want a cinematic look, the videos out there tell you, oh, go to exposure and, for example, play with the shadows, make them darker like this, or go to saturation and play with it like that. So you can watch lots of YouTube videos out there that give you guides or hints on how to achieve specific looks with color grading. So that was for saturation. And this is finally for color. You can also play with the midtones, the highlights, and the global. You can see that. You can play with the color. This is called the color board. So you have the color curves, you have the color wheels, and you have the color board. Now, let's talk about something very important in Final Cut as well, which is stabilization. You see this clip right here. It was originally not this stable. Let me disable the sound again. You can see that it wasn't very stable before. You see this clip? All right, let's go back to this clip. Believe it or not, this was not a drone shot. It looks like a drone shot, but I was able to achieve this by using a stick, and I placed the camera on the stick, and I was able to achieve this kind of drone shot look. So you can see that it's smooth. The animation is smooth. The playback is smooth. You can achieve lots of post-production stabilization with Final Cut through advanced options here. If you go again to this and go to stabilization, you see that? I've already used this here on this clip. Let's turn it off for now. In fact, yeah, I turned it off. This is how the original clip was like before. You see it was a little bit wobbly. Yeah. So let's press that. Let's click it again. Go to stabilization, turn it on. So video stabilization is very, very nice with Final Cut. You can correct shaky video. You can smooth a clip's shaky footage by correcting the stabilization, the rolling shutter, or both. So I like to do both, but beware, if you do it too much, sometimes it's going to look bad. So you got to experiment with both, with stabilization and rolling shutter. So the stabilization feature reduces the camera motion in your video so that the shaky parts can be played back more smoothly, and you can turn off stabilization for any clip so that it plays back to the original recording like I showed you. Now, not to go into too many details, there are different options for stabilization. So if I go here and turn it on, we have different methods for stabilization. You have to wait for Final Cut here to finish processing. Always look at this little thing here. This tells you when the thing is going to finish processing. So I used smooth cam method. It depends on your scene. You can use inertia cam, smooth cam, or automatic. If you don't know what these things are, just keep it on automatic for now. Okay, it's gonna analyze for dominant motion here. Wait for it to finish processing. Okay, so keep in mind though, if you increase the stabilization, it's gonna have this zoom in effect. It's gonna zoom in on your clip. So let's say I want the full thing. Okay, there you go. So let's add stabilization here again. Automatic. Let's see how that goes. Oh, you see that? That's terrible because it zoomed in a lot. You can also try experimenting with the rolling shutter. The rolling shutter also helps with the stabilization. So if you turn this on, you can select the amount medium, high. I kept it at medium. Again, you have got to experiment and see how that goes. Sometimes if you keep it too high, it's going to distort the video and you don't want that. All right, next we got to talk a little bit about audio again. So let's go back to audio, and I want to talk about how to adjust the volume first of all. Let's say the volume here, let's say I want to increase the volume a little bit. The way to do that is either to come here and drag it all the way there so you can see the volume is increasing, or go all the way here and drag the slider. Sometimes you want to reduce the volume, sometimes you want to increase the volume. And the way to tell that is always look at your waveform. If you can see red lines on your waveform, so right now I can't see much, but you see that if I increase the volume, you can see it's starting to have some red lines here, and that's not good. So let's reduce the music. Yeah. Go to audio configuration here, and you can see that in dialog 1. So I don't have any red lines. If you don't have any red lines, that's good. But there's also yellow. It starts like this. So it starts with normal, so blue, and then yellow, and then red. Red, you don't want the red. So this is going to be very distorted. It's going to sound horrible. So that's why I had to reduce the audio here. That's why I reduced it by 2, actually. You can see that it goes down. It calms down right there. So make sure your audio is not distorted. Make sure you adjust the volume. You can also add audio effects here. The way to do that is to go here and press this. This gives you the effects panel, and scroll all the way down and you can see the audio effects here. And there are so many audio effects. This can get too advanced and we're not going to talk about this, but you can experiment with these different types of audio effects. Some of them are very useful. So for example, some of them help you remove, some of them help you increase the bass. Some of them help you with distortion. Some of them help you. Oh yeah, speaking of audio, if you have audio that has noise, there are ways to reduce noise. And you can do that by going to audio enhancements here. And you can see the loudness and noise removal tools here. The most important is the noise removal tool. Now this is just this is a music file, but I need to get you another file. Let's say I want to use another file for this to give you a better understanding of how that works. I'm trying to find a file where I'm talking. Okay, suppose this file right here. By the way, when you drag a video and you place it on top of another clip, this clip that is underneath that clip, this one will not show. What will show is this. So anything that goes on top of anything in Final Cut will show first. So you see that? This will no longer show. Unless, of course, you play with the opacity. If I make that, let's say, you see, then it's going to show. But otherwise, it's not. Anyway, this has audio. Let's listen to this audio here. Hello, Miss Tria. Do you like my new house? Okay, so this audio here, let's put back the opacity to 100%. You can clean up the audio by going here and then going to noise removal. Try experimenting again with the amounts. If you increase the amount for noise removal, you're going to have some kind of weird sounding audio. I'm not going to say distortion, but it's going to sound weird. It's not going to sound natural. It's going to sound bad. So the more you increase the noise removal, the worse it's going to be. Always try with 50 first, and also experiment with loudness. Loudness can really help with making the sound feel crisper. So turn it on and experiment with the amounts and uniformity here. Let's see how that sounds like now. Okay, there was a lot of reverb in this place. That's why you can hear some echo, but the sound was much more improved. The audio was improved because I removed the noise, and I've increased the loudness here with 40%. It was actually 40. You can play with the amounts here. You can change the view for your video, and the way you do that is to go here. You can change the size of it. You can go here and say, let's say I want it 25%. So it becomes smaller. Sometimes you want to do this. Oh yeah, this is going to introduce us to more options like transform and crop and distort. These are very, very important for your video as well. So let's say I want to superimpose this video right here, this clip. So I want to superimpose this video on this. How do I do that and make it look smaller? So you can do this by going here and pressing transform. And then you can see these lines, these circles here, and that allows you to control the video. You can see that. I can move it. Now let's resize it like this. Okay, let's change our view to 50%, for example. Well, let's keep it 100%. All right, now I want to move it here. You can see that. All right, let's play our clip now. Alan, I miss you too young. Do you like my new house? So transform is very, very useful. You're going to be using transform a lot when you want to control the size and the location of your clip. This is very, very useful. Next, we have crop. Crop is also useful when you have lots of different items. Sometimes you add logos. Sometimes you add different pictures. So crop can crop your video or picture. So now it looks like this. Let's go back to transform. So now it looks like this. Okay. Now you know what transform does and what crop does. Distort distorts the image. So if I press, sometimes you want to distort the image. So if I go here and start playing with it, you can see that. You can start distorting the image, and that has specific uses. We're not going to be talking about that here, but now you know.